The most iconic company in American technology history just announced it's leaving California. On December 9th, 2025, Apple Incorporated revealed plans to relocate its corporate headquarters from Cupertino, California, to Austin, Texas. This decision ends 49 years of California-based leadership and represents the most significant corporate departure in Silicon Valley history. I'm Elizabeth Davis, and this is the Elizabeth Davis Channel. Before we begin, I need to ask something important. If you find value in this analysis, please hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with anyone who cares about the future of American innovation. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps this content reach more people who need to understand what's happening. I also need to make something absolutely clear. This is the only official channel. Many people are copying my content, my face, my style, but this is the original source. You're watching authentic, independent analysis here. What we're witnessing isn't just one company changing addresses. This is a seismic shift in American economic geography. The state that birthed Silicon Valley, that transformed global technology, that made innovation synonymous with California, is watching its most valuable company walk away. The question isn't whether Apple survives. The question is what happens to California when even Apple concludes the state has become too expensive for its future. Apple's announcement affects 36,000 California employees over the next 7 years. That eliminates approximately $8.7 billion in annual economic activity from the state. The company framed this as a strategic transition necessary for long-term competitiveness. But the numbers tell a more direct story. 3 converging forces made this decision inevitable. First, California's corporate tax burden. The state charges an 8.84% corporate income tax. Combined with Santa Clara County business taxes and fees, Apple faces an effective rate of 11.3% on California-sourced income. That creates approximately $2.9 billion in annual tax obligations. Texas charges 0 corporate income tax, 0 personal income tax. The tax savings alone, $2.1 billion annually, justify relocation. Second, real estate costs. Commercial property in Santa Clara County averages $1,340 per square foot. Austin's domain area costs $420 per square foot. For Apple's planned 4.2 million square foot Austin campus, that differential saves $890 million yearly on real estate expenses alone. When Silicon Valley office space costs more than 3 times competing markets, the economics become impossible to ignore. Third, Texas offered aggressive incentives that California couldn't match. The Texas package totals $750 million, property tax abatements worth $420 million over 15 years, $180 million in infrastructure improvements connecting Apple's campus to highways and transit systems, $150 million for workforce training programs. California's counteroffer, $140 million in tax credits spread over 10 years, appeared symbolic rather than competitive. The state that pioneered technology leadership couldn't compete on basic economics. These aren't abstract policy debates. These are fundamental cost structures that determine where companies can afford to operate. Apple generated $391 billion in revenue during fiscal 2025. The company dominates global technology. Yet even from that position of strength, California's costs exceeded what the company's leadership considered sustainable. If Apple can't justify California's expense structure, what company can? The announcement timing carries particular significance. Apple opened Apple Park's Phase 2 expansion just 24 months earlier in December 2023. A $1.2 billion investment, adding 850,000 square feet for 4,000 additional employees. Governor Gavin Newsom attended that ceremony, proclaiming Apple's continued investment proved California remains the undisputed global center of innovation. That proclamation aged poorly. Within 2 years, Apple's board determined that ensuring long-term competitiveness requires consolidating operations where costs support innovation rather than constrain it. The company's internal analysis, labeled Project Lone Star, evaluated every aspect of California operations against alternatives. The conclusion was unambiguous. Staying in California creates structural disadvantages that compound annually. Apple's California story began April 1st, 1976, when Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak founded Apple Computer in Jobs' parents' garage at 2066 Chris Drive in Los Altos. The company moved to Cupertino in 1977, establishing headquarters that expanded over decades into Apple Park. That iconic 2.8 million square foot circular campus, designed by Norman Foster and completed in 2017 at a cost of $5 billion, occupies 175 acres and houses 12,000 employees. Apple Park became more than corporate headquarters. It became architectural landmark and pilgrimage site for technology enthusiasts worldwide. The visitor center attracted 2.4 million visitors annually. Local elementary schools organized field trips so children could see where the iPhone was designed. The campus validated California's claim to technological supremacy, physical proof that world-changing innovation happened here despite rising costs. By 2025, Apple directly employed 36,000 California workers with average compensation of $187,400, generating approximately $6.7 billion in annual California payroll. The company's presence extended beyond direct employment. Research facilities in Sunnyvale employed 8,400 workers. Retail operations across California employed 7,200. Manufacturing partnerships with suppliers throughout the state created an ecosystem of 140,000 California jobs dependent on Apple's presence. Apple represented more than economic activity. It symbolized California's transformation from agricultural economy to global technology leader, the physical manifestation of innovation culture that made Silicon Valley shorthand for entrepreneurial ambition. When people thought about California technology leadership, they thought about Apple. That association dies when Apple's designers work from Austin and engineers operate from Texas facilities. The December 9th announcement arrived via carefully staged press conference at 10 a.m. Pacific, with CEO Tim Cook delivering the news personally. Cook stated that after extensive analysis, Apple's board determined ensuring the company's long-term competitiveness requires relocating where costs support innovation. The 7-year transition begins with 8,200 corporate functions in 2026. Employees received notifications December 9th through 11th. Relocation packages averaged $120,000 for moves to Texas. Severance packages offered 8 weeks' pay per year of service for employees declining relocation. The company framed these as generous terms, but the reality is starker. For most employees, the choice means uprooting families or accepting unemployment in a contracting market. Governor Newsom responded at 12:15 p.m., struggling visibly to control emotions. Apple is California. Steve Jobs is California. The innovations that changed the world happened in Cupertino garages and campuses. This decision doesn't just hurt California's economy, it betrays everything Apple claimed to stand for about valuing people and communities. His voice broke discussing what this means for families whose lives are built around Apple employment. Cupertino Mayor Sheila Mohan's statement was more direct. Apple employs 12,000 people at Apple Park, generating $2.25 billion in annual payroll for our city. Apple contributes $127 million annually in taxes and fees. This departure doesn't just eliminate jobs. It dismantles our city's entire economic foundation and identity. Without Apple, Cupertino loses the defining element that made it globally recognized. The announcement's timing, just 24 months after Apple celebrated Apple Park Phase 2 completion, compounds the betrayal. Governor Newsom attended that December 2023 ceremony where Apple invested $1.2 billion in advanced research laboratories and design studios. Newsom proclaimed the investment proved California remains the undisputed global center of innovation. Apple's CEO stood beside him, affirming the company's California commitment. 2 years later, that commitment meant nothing against $2.1 billion in annual tax savings. California's tax structure creates overwhelming disadvantages. The 8.84% corporate income tax, combined with county business taxes, creates an effective 11.3% rate on Apple's estimated $18.5 billion in California-sourced income. For Apple's $29 billion annual California tax burden, Texas saves the company $2.1 billion yearly. That single line item justifies relocation. Commercial real estate compounds the tax differential. Prime technology campus space in Santa Clara County costs $1,340 per square foot, according to CBRE's fourth quarter 2025 analysis. Austin's domain area costs $420 per square foot. Apple's planned Austin campus at 4.2 million square feet costs approximately $1.76 billion to develop. A comparable Santa Clara County facility would cost $5.63 billion, a $3.87 billion differential. When applied across Apple's entire operational footprint, the cost advantage becomes overwhelming. The company's planned $50 billion U.S. expansion over 5 years directs $38.7 billion to Texas facilities, $6.2 billion to North Carolina operations, $3.4 billion to Arizona manufacturing partnerships, and zero to new California developments. The state that birthed Apple receives nothing from the company's largest expansion in history. Talent costs create additional pressure. California's cost of living forces higher compensation to attract workers. Apple's average California engineering compensation reached $234,700 in 2025. Comparable positions in Austin averaged $167,300, a $67,400 differential per employee. For Apple's 22,000 California engineering employees, that represents $1.48 billion in annual compensation differences, driven entirely by California's housing costs. Housing costs drive the disparity. Median home prices in Cupertino reached $2.47 million in 2025. Austin's median was $485,000. New Apple employees in California required $600,000 annual salaries to afford housing near campus. Austin employees managed on $180,000. The gap reflects not differences in work value, but differences in state cost structures that make California increasingly uncompetitive. Dr. Michael Bernick, former director of California's Employment Development Department and current Milken Institute fellow, stated in November 2025 that California's regulatory environment and cost structure have created conditions where even the most profitable companies can't justify continued expansion. Apple's departure will trigger cascading exits from companies watching to see if anyone would dare leave first. That prediction is already materializing. Infrastructure limitations compound costs. California's housing shortage, traffic congestion, and strained public services made recruitment increasingly difficult. Apple's internal surveys showed 43% of California employees citing quality of life concerns by 2025, up from 18% in 2020. The state's infrastructure hasn't kept pace with population demands, creating deteriorating conditions even for high-income workers who should theoretically afford California's premium costs. Texas offered not just lower costs, but aggressive pursuit. The $750 million Texas package demonstrates how seriously competing states take these opportunities. Property tax abatements worth $420 million over 15 years, $180 million in infrastructure connecting Apple's campus to transportation networks, $150 million for workforce training ensuring qualified employees. California's $140 million counteroffer over 10 years looked passive by comparison. These pressures operate simultaneously. Higher taxes reduce capital for research investment. Higher real estate costs constrain facility expansion. Higher compensation costs narrow margins. The result is Apple's planned $50 billion expansion directing $0 to new California developments. The state receives nothing from its most iconic company's largest growth initiative in history. This pattern extends beyond Apple. Between January 2024 and December 2025, California lost 47 major technology headquarters, according to Stanford Business School tracking. Tesla relocated to Austin, Oracle moved to Austin, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise shifted to Houston, Palantir chose Denver. Each departure validates subsequent exits, creating momentum that becomes self-reinforcing. When the companies that defined Silicon Valley leave, what remains of Silicon Valley? Direct economic impacts cascade across California. 36,000 job losses over 7 years eliminate $6.7 billion in annual wages using Apple's disclosed average compensation. Apple Park generates approximately $127 million annually in Cupertino taxes and fees against a city general fund budget of $284 million annually. Losing Apple's contribution creates existential fiscal crisis requiring service cuts or tax increases that further erode competitiveness. Property values cascade downward. Apple Park, valued at approximately $8.4 billion as active corporate headquarters, faces dramatic devaluation when converted to multi-tenant office space. in a market already facing 23.7% vacancy rates. Surrounding residential properties within 5 miles that commanded premiums for proximity to Apple employment face 18 to 27% value declines, according to Santa Clara County real estate analysts. That erosion reduces property tax revenues by approximately $340 million annually. Supply chain disruptions affect hundreds of California companies. Foxconn Industrial, providing product assembly partnership from California facilities, disclosed Apple's departure eliminates $2.4 billion in annual California-related revenue, forcing 4,200 position eliminations. Jabil Circuit loses $870 million in annual Apple-related California operations. Flex Limited disclosed 1,840 California layoffs attributed to Apple's transition. Tertiary impacts affect businesses serving Apple's workforce. Consider Banana Leaf, a popular Cupertino restaurant generating 70% of revenue from Apple employees. Owner Lisa Wong stated that 12,000 regular customers built this business over 18 years. When they relocate to Texas, we close. There's no other concentration of customers replacing that. Small businesses throughout the region face similar calculations as 36,000 high-income consumers disappear. Santa Clara County's unemployment stood at 4.2% in November 2025. Federal Reserve Research estimates each technology headquarters job supports 3.2 additional positions. Applied to Apple's departure, 36,000 direct jobs cascade into 115,200 indirect losses over 7 years, totaling approximately 151,200 positions across California's economy. That represents economic devastation for regions built around Apple's presence. Michael Chen worked at Apple Park 16 years, advancing to senior product designer, earning $267,400 annually with stock compensation. He received notification December 9th, learning his position transfers to Austin by June 2027, or he accepts severance of $410,000. My wife works at Stanford, earning $156,300 as research scientist. We have 3 children aged 8, 11, and 14. Our mortgage at 6.1% on a house bought in 2017 for $1.8 million, now worth approximately $2.6 million. Moving means my wife abandons 12 years of academic career progress. My kids leave excellent schools and friends. Staying means unemployment at 48, competing for limited design positions. Sarah Martinez, 39, worked Apple operations 11 years, earning $198,700. She's a single mother with 2 children, aged 7 and 10. The severance of $169,000 before taxes gives me perhaps 10 months before depleting savings. Texas means leaving my parents who provide childcare. The workforce is 58% over age 40, 32% female, 89% with specialized technology skills. Only 41% initially accepted relocation, meaning 21,240 California workers eventually separate. Yet Apple retains significant California operations temporarily. The company maintains retail stores employing 7,200 California workers and research facilities that won't immediately relocate. Apple reported record revenue of $391 billion in fiscal 2025. This creates split reality. Apple values California's talent while rejecting California's costs. The central question posed December 2025 isn't whether Apple survives. The company dominates global technology with $391 billion in annual revenue. The question is what California loses when its most iconic company concludes the state has become too expensive for its future. Apple represented more than employment. It symbolized California's claim to innovation leadership, proof that world-changing ideas happened here. That mythology collapses when Apple's designers work from Austin and engineers operate from Texas facilities. Governor Newsom's emotional response can't overcome $2.1 billion in annual tax savings, $890 million in real estate advantages, and $750 million in Texas incentives. When Apple leaves California for Texas, what remains of California's innovation economy? Subscribe to Elizabeth Davis. Share your thoughts in the comments. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand what's happening to American innovation. Only fundamental policy changes addressing why California's costs exceed competitors by 40 to 60% will determine whether Silicon Valley retains technology leadership or watch as companies migrate to states offering better economics? That question can't be answered by press conferences, only by policy changes preventing future departures. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree unless the tree is planted in soil too expensive to sustain growth.